Have you ever looked at a world map and wondered why the borders are drawn the way they are? We all know about the big ones, World War I and II, the Napoleonic Wars, They're in every history textbook. But what about the conflicts that have been lost to time, the forgotten wars that quietly, yet dramatically, redrew the map and shaped the world we live in today? These aren't just historical footnotes, they are the secret architects of our modern geopolitical landscape. Today, we're diving deep into three of these overlooked but incredibly influential conflicts. From the heart of Europe to the plains of South America, we'll uncover the stories of ambition, struggle, and consequence that have been hiding in plain sight. So, buckle up, because history is about to get a lot more interesting. Let's start in Europe, in the mid-19th century. You've probably heard of German unification, right? Bismarck, Prussia, all that jazz. But have you heard of the Second Schleswig War of 1864? Probably not. Yet, this short, sharp conflict between the German Confederation, led by Prussia, and Austria and the Kingdom of Denmark was the first crucial step in Bismarck's master plan to create Germany. The issue was all about two duchies, Schleswig and Holstein. They had a super complicated status. Holstein was ethnically German and part of the German Confederation, but both were ruled by the Danish king. For centuries, this arrangement was well, it was a mess waiting to happen. When a new Danish constitution tried to integrate Schleswig more closely into Denmark, the German states cried foul. Prussia's Otto von Bismarck saw his chance. He wasn't just interested in liberating Germans. He wanted to test his newly reformed army and assert Prussian dominance over Austria. The war itself was a foregone conclusion. The combined might of Prussia and Austria was way too much for tiny Denmark. The Danish army fought bravely, especially at the Battle of Dibble, which has become a legendary last stand in Danish history. But in the end, they were overwhelmed. The result? Denmark was forced to cede Schleswig, Holstein, and another duchy, Lauenburg, to Prussia and Austria. This is where it gets really clever. Bismarck didn't want to share. Just 2 years later, he provoked a war with Austria over the administration of these new territories. Prussia won that war in just 7 weeks, kicked Austria out of German affairs for good, and formed the North German Confederation. The Second Schleswig War was the domino that started it all. It set the stage for the Franco-Prussian War a few years later, which completed the unification of Germany. The modern border between Germany and Denmark. It was drawn, erased, and redrawn because of this forgotten war. It's a perfect example of how a seemingly minor regional conflict can have massive, continent-spanning consequences. Now, let's travel across the Atlantic to South America for a war so brutal, so devastating, it's often called the deadliest conflict in the continent's history. I'm talking about the War of the Triple Alliance, or as it's known in Paraguay, the Great War. Fought from 1864 to 1870, it pitted tiny, landlocked Paraguay against the combined forces of 3 regional giants, Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. So what on earth could have caused this? The origins are complex, a tangled web of political rivalries, economic interests, and border disputes. The leader of Paraguay, Francisco Solano Lopez, was an ambitious dictator who had built up a surprisingly large and well-equipped army. He saw his country as a rising power and knew Prussia of the Americas. The neighboring empires of Brazil and Argentina, however, saw Paraguay as an obstacle to their own ambitions in the resource-rich Rio de la Plata basin. When Brazil intervened in a civil war in Uruguay, tipping the scales against Paraguay's ally, Lopez saw it as a direct threat. He declared war on Brazil, and when Argentina refused to let his troops cross its territory to attack Brazil, he declared war on them too. Uruguay, now with a pro-Brazilian government, joined the alliance against Paraguay. It was 1 against 3. What followed was 6 years of unimaginable horror. The war was expected to be over in months, but the Paraguayans, fighting for their very existence, put up a ferocious resistance. The battles were bloody and the conditions were horrific. But the alliance's superior numbers and resources slowly ground Paraguay down. The war only ended with the death of Lopez himself, who was killed in the final battle, famously shouting, "I die with my country." The consequences were catastrophic, especially for Paraguay. The country was utterly destroyed. Its pre-war population of around 500,000 was reduced to an estimated 220,000. And what's truly staggering is that of the survivors, less than 30,000 were adult men. Paraguay lost over half its territory to Brazil and Argentina, land it has never recovered. The war completely reconfigured the balance of power in South America, cementing Brazil and Argentina as the dominant nations and leaving Paraguay a shattered shell of its former self. Its borders were literally carved up by its neighbors, a direct result of a war that most of the world has completely forgotten. For our final stop, let's head back to Europe, but this time to the Balkans, the so-called powder keg of Europe, a decade before World War I. Another series of conflicts erupted that dramatically reshaped this volatile region, the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913. These two short wars were the explosive finale to centuries of Ottoman Turkish rule in southeastern Europe. For hundreds of years, the Ottoman Empire had controlled vast territories in the Balkans. But by the early 20th century, it was known as the sick man of Europe, its power crumbling. The newly independent Balkan states Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, and Montenegro saw their chance. They secretly formed the Balkan League, put aside their own rivalries for a moment, and in 1912 launched a coordinated attack on the Ottoman Empire. The First Balkan War was a stunning success for the League. In a matter of months, they drove the Ottoman forces almost completely out of Europe, pushing them back to the doorstep of Constantinople. The great powers of Europe were shocked by the speed and decisiveness of the victory. The problem was, what to do with all the new territory? The victors couldn't agree on how to divide the spoils, particularly the region of Macedonia, which was claimed by Serbia, Bulgaria, and Greece. This led directly to the Second Balkan War in 1913. Bulgaria, feeling cheated out of its fair share, launched a surprise attack on its former allies, Serbia and Greece. It was a huge miscalculation. Romania and even the Ottoman Empire joined the fight against Bulgaria. Surrounded and outnumbered, Bulgaria was quickly defeated. The aftermath was a brand new map of the Balkans. The Ottoman Empire in Europe was reduced to a small sliver of land around Istanbul. Serbia nearly doubled in size, becoming a much more powerful and assertive player in the region. This greatly alarmed its neighbor, Austria-Hungary, which had a large Serbian minority of its own. Greece and Romania also made significant territorial gains. And a new country, Albania, was created to prevent Serbia from gaining a coastline on the Adriatic. These new borders were a recipe for future conflict. The tensions between an emboldened Serbia and an anxious Austria-Hungary skyrocketed. Just 1 year later, in 1914, a Serbian nationalist assassinated the Austro-Hungarian Archduke Franz Ferdinand and in Sarajevo. This was the spark that ignited the powder keg, plunging the continent into World War I. The Balkan Wars are often overlooked, seen as just a prelude to the Great War, but in reality, they created the very conditions, the new borders, the heightened nationalism, and the intense rivalries that made the global catastrophe of 1914 almost inevitable. So, from the birth of Germany to the devastation of Paraguay and the redrawing of the Balkans, these forgotten wars had a monumental impact. They show us that history isn't just about the big, famous events. It's a complex chain of cause and effect, where a seemingly small conflict in one corner of the globe can send shockwaves across continents and through time, shaping the very lines on the map that define our world today. The borders we see as permanent fixtures were often drawn in the heat of battles you've never heard of. What other forgotten stories are hiding in the pages of our history books? That's a question worth exploring. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the hidden corners of history as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. Let me know in the comments which forgotten conflict you think we should cover next. See you in the next video.